Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Roger Vadim's Barbarella in 1968. So, here we are with the review of Barbarella, a film that I watched today. Now, this is in 1968, so it's around about when the Hays Code was kind of lifted, and loads of after that, that's when some great stuff came out due to that. There was allowed to be more violence, which is great, but also the flip side is and sexual content that a lot of filmmakers and just the attitudes and everything, they changed in negative ways, and films like this came out. Yes, so Barbarella. Now, this film is frequently voted as quite a lot of lists actually as one of the worst films of all time. It's got 5.9 or something on IMDb, and it's not acclaimed at all. There are those, it is kind of a cult film in some ways, and there are those kind of say it's a masterpiece, or it's actually a great film, misunderstood, and fine. I'm always going to be fine. That's fine with me if as long as they don't say, oh, you're stupid if you don't understand, it was a masterpiece, because this film for me is no masterpiece. Now let me tell you, this is one of the worst films I've ever seen in my life. I was shocked. It stars Jane Fonda, of course, daughter of Henry Fonda, who is an absolute legend, in my book, especially Once Upon a Time in the West. Now, she's been in some great stuff, obviously, and yeah, but this film, she plays Barbarella, and not a good performance. But this film really cannot be described, in normal ways, and really this review will not do it full justice. It's a film, that I say before I probably do a review, you have to see this film if you really want to know what it's like. It's one of the most bizarre experiences I've ever had, just ever. I really just sat there, and as well, eventually it got boring, beyond tears, bored me to death. But it was, just bizarre. Never seen anything like it. It's the same year as Kubrick's 2001, and another sci-fi film, and much, a massive difference in quality. One of the worst films for Barbarella, and one of the best films in cinema ever. That's maybe a little bit of a spoiler for my Kubrick series that I do. But yes, this film, it's a science fiction, fantasy, kind of action, adventure, kind of something else, I don't know, but it really is mental. The opening credits, just really set the tone for how bizarre this film is, and as well how vulgar it is. Let's be honest. The sexual content in this film is quite derogatory. It's handled in a way that is just, it is offensive. It's so far. What they do is go so far, and the manner and in how Jane Fonda's character of Barbarella kind of just gives people rewards of kind of sexual nature. It's just a bit. It's so poor taste, and there's never any humanity or anything, or any moments in the film where it's handled in any proper way. It is just a kind of sleazy kind of film, and it's just as well, it's bizarre in that sense. The opening credits, she's kind of just floating about and undressing, and then you see her breasts out, and stuff, and it just kind of set the tone for what this film is. Absolutely insane. It really is. And it's just so painful eventually, it really is. The first 5 minutes, I was thinking, wow, this is something else, really just. And the acting in this film is terrible. Something else, really. The script is just, when I watched this film, and at the end of the film, I just thought, looking back over the film, there's not been a single line of dialogue that actually landed, or any. I've rarely experienced this with a film where not a single line of dialogue actually registered with me, really on any level. None of it made sense. It was all just awfully written, and the dialogue was just awful. You know, it's really just something else. I cannot describe it, but it does not register. It does not work on any level. The script is absolutely atrocious. It is dumb. This film, it is really that's how to describe it, and bizarre at the same time. And then eventually immensely boring. One of the top 5 easily most boring films I've ever seen. Now this film, of course, basically about this character Barbarella. She's this kind of hero that, you know, she comes from Earth, and it's set in the future, of course. And she comes from Earth, and then she goes to this other planet, and she's given a mission. I can't remember the name of the planet, but she basically got to take down this guy called this scientist, Duran, yeah, basically go to his planet, and you know he's got a weapon that can eliminate all humanity or something like that. And yeah, she goes to that planet. She meets all these weird people, and basically, you know, tries to go about a mission. But really, the first 5 minutes, to be honest, is the best of the film, because the rest of it's even worse. And what it does is it loses any sort of focus, you know, to that story, to that narrative, and along the way it just falls apart so much from what an already just awful film it was, that actually it's my second film that I'll be viewing on this channel that gets my unwatchable mark, and I'll get to exactly what the score will be, but it's that bad. But it completely loses track of any sort of story. The characters in this film, where are they? I don't know. There was no characters in this film. You know, couldn't pinpoint any. They were so bad in this film. You know, no one acted like humans at all, and that's fantasy films. You know, and sci-fi films. A lot of people, you know, don't like, and I love when they're done well. You know, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, all this kind of stuff. There's so many great sci-fi fantasy films, but when you've got bad, you know, films in this genre, you know, and you've got one that adds loads of different other films in the mix, you know, like kind of psychedelic stuff, sexual stuff, you know, and just the fact that, you know, fantasy done bad and sci-fi done bad is this film. You know, it really makes a film that you cannot relate to, because the filmmaker does not know how to draw on relatable, grounded, or, you know, human themes, you know, and bring them up, and yes, gloss them, or just kind of have fantasy elements in there, fantasy worlds, but they have to have some sort of reality, you know, in any sense. You know, it has to be even just little glimmers, little roots of reality that, you know, kind of stem. But this film had none, and as well, combined with the awful script, the awful acting, it just made for a film that is not believable on any level whatsoever. A one that is so boring, because the characters are just so there's no one there. There's no characters. It's just it's so bad, this film. The acting performances is atrocious. Yes, I'll say it. Jane Fonda is not good in this film. You know, an absolutely abysmal performance. Unfortunately, did not get the performance, and a lot of the other ones are worse. You know, just so much bizarre characters. You know, things on this planet. You know, the fact that you know, they always, a filmmaker like this, you know, he obviously thought, just because it's fantasy and sci-fi, you know, he just thinks he has to kind of make the characters, or you know, the people on the other planet completely just mental, weird, do odd things, you know, bizarre moments, and that's not the case. You know, it doesn't have to be like that, and it's just a shame, because, you know, once you reach the planet, you know, these people all talk in different weird ways, and it's just these bizarre people that just pop out of nowhere, kind of do stupid stuff that just make no sense whatsoever. And then she has a machine or something that kind of switches how she hears different languages, accents or something, and it's just bizarre. Really is. And then she meets these people, and she has sex with loads of people in the film, in the most dumbest and you know, just poor taste of ways you can imagine. It's mental in the way she kind of just gives people pleasures and stuff throughout the film. Bizarre, really is, and poor taste. You know, really quite offensive, this film, and if it wasn't, you know, as bad as it was, you know, just laughably bad, just awful, be even more so offensive. I just think this is so poorly handled. She is as a female hero, but you know, they've ruined any sort of kind of thing they could have done with that, the kind of empowerment, because they just made her just the way they treated her throughout the film. What a shame, you know, and just it's just really poor taste and just offensive stuff in the manner it's done, you know, and just the way as well. The ending, I will say now, this is a spoiler. One of the ending segments, the kind of climax between her and Duran Duran is involving. I'm pretty sure, you know, this is what I gathered from seeing it. I couldn't quite believe it, but a machine that kind of gave her an orgasm. You know, that's what happened. That was absolutely one of the most shameful and bizarre things I have ever witnessed. I cannot believe this film exists. You know, it's just, as I said, it's so bizarre and everything. I cannot, you know, take anything from the characters, you know, and there's not a single line of dialogue really that works. The story just is non-existent really. It's apart from the very beginning and the very end. But even then, very cut-off ending, just generic. You know, she meets this character. I can't quite remember his name, but you know, he's blind and he's an angel kind of thing, wings or something. And he's with her a lot of the film, and an awful performance, and one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen as well. When he came into it, he flew her about throughout the film. You've got this other guy, this kind of this old guy, that's kind of in it as well. But it's just it's so poorly handled. You know, to call this film cheap is an understatement. Some people praise the visuals, you know, and I was thinking towards the end, you know, I might bump the score up a tiny bit because, you know, the visuals weren't absolutely atrocious all the way through. But, you know, a lot of the sets are absolutely awful. You know, this is so cheap. The effects are bad as well. No excuse. Just awful. Poorly directed as well, of course it's poorly directed. It's one of the most random films I've ever seen, and of course it was not brought together at all. You know, it fell apart completely from what was already, you know, just an awful opening 5 minutes. But the rest of the film is really unwatchable for me, and it's not really a film that I can say, you know, it was throughout enjoyably bad. There's a couple of moments where I just, you know, I did laugh unintentionally, you know, at the stuff, but it was so painful that outweighed any sort of sniggers here and there about how bad it was, because this is painful, you know. The fact that it's so boring and cheap and something that I cannot relate to or connect to on any level whatsoever. The visuals, there was a couple of moments where the colours and stuff weren't that bad. You know, maybe one of the sets in the film, just maybe one, wasn't awful. But you know what? I'm gonna be harsh on this film. You know, I'm not gonna be generous on this film actually, because maybe some of the colours here and there, you know, and the cinematography was actually quite awful throughout. The framing and everything was not good, really at all. So that's, you know, and the editing was poor. You know, the film had no flow, no sense of direction at all either. But it did not move any sort of. It just disappeared into nothingness. And you know, I'm not gonna bump up the score because of, you know, a couple of fragments of you know, aspects of the film have some you know, decent visuals. You know, basically this film just fails in every level. You know, as I say, there's a couple bits where the colours, you know, they're okay, but I can't give the film even a percentage more than what I would give it because of that. Because it fails in every level, you know, in terms of writing, direction, editing, any sort of characters, the acting performance, the performances throughout the film. B grade, you know, is this film's middle name. You know, the performances are absolutely atrocious or just non-existent. What they were trying to do with the interaction, you know, the kind of communication between different races and stuff in the film, and different people from different planets and stuff like that, failed at every attempt. And the way a lot of it was handled with the sexual stuff just took away from that as well. it was just a cheap cop-out way to kind of do things. It's absolutely mental. What was happening with the pills, you know, the stuff where the ideas where the, kind of, and the way it's executed with the way that they had to take pills if they wanted to have sex, and all that thing they've done with the hand. What is this film, you know? And it's just absolutely mental. It's insane, this film. You know, I can definitely agree that it's one of the worst films I've ever seen. And on this channel, there's only one film that beats it in terms of how bad that film is, you know, and that is Police Academy 7. This film is not quite as bad as that, but apart from that, it is by far the worst film I've reviewed on my channel. Die Another Day is an absolute magnum opus compared to this film. You know, give me Die Another Day. It's just, you know, I'll watch that film 10 times and I'll be happy if I never have to see this film again, because this is not even a film. This is absolutely disgraceful. If you want to be bored to death and just be, you know, disturbed by how bad cinema can be, and how bad filmmaking can be, and just how bizarre film can be, you know, watch this film from start to finish, and you will come out changed on the other side. I completely agree with it being one of the worst films ever made. As I say, you know, it just fails in every way. And the cinematography is nothing to praise at all, really. The visuals, the sets are very cheap, and the way that the characters are kind of portrayed against the backgrounds and everything, and the sets, it's just not even thought through, I don't feel. So I can't even praise that. The way she just goes to the different locations is just a chore, you know, to say the least. And the interaction with the other people from different planets, you know, it's just bizarre, so poorly handled. You know, I cannot fathom anything that I can make sense. I cannot make sense of any of this film, anything that happens in this film at all, really. The first bit as well was very just poor taste, dirty filmmaking. This what happened there. You know, the old guy, he spoke to her. You know, Barbarella. Just such a stupid film, offensive film. This film is unwatchable. You know what? I'm gonna say it, and you know, I'm not gonna give it a 1% just because one or two moments it had, you know, visuals that weren't awful. Because most of the visuals were pretty awful, and you know, the effects and everything, not well thought out. Everything was so bad, so painful, such an assault on the senses. So unfathomable. You know, none of it made any sort of sense. There was no story, it disappeared. No characters at all. There's attempts of comedy, and it fails on every level. Because of this, I will give it a 0%. Unwatchable. And this was always really, from the beginning, going to be single figures. You know, I was just hating every single moment of this film. You know, I cannot believe this film. It's a shock to the system, and you know, I cannot believe it. You know, I cannot believe it exists. What were they thinking when they made this film? It really, you know, it's a cult film, and it's fine if you like it. But for me personally, it's one of the worst things I have ever just experienced. You know, and it will stay with me forever, really, in all the worst ways, really. And it's not even a film that you can say like The Room that's so bad it's good kind of thing. And The Room is miles better than this. I don't quite think The Room is one of the, you know, absolute worst 10 films or anything like that. And you know, it's a masterpiece compared to this. At least there is some sort of characters in that film, some sort of emotion. This film as well, it has no drama. There's no tension throughout the entire film, really, at all, apart from the ending, which is an orgasm machine. I mean, come on. And then she just gives in anyway. Such an offensive film, this, and so bad on every level that it gets a 0%. It is nothing. This film is absolutely nothing. Yeah, Barbarella, one of the absolute worst films I've ever seen. Easily top 5 worst I've ever seen. Second worst I've reviewed on my channel. An absolute something else of awful. You know, unwatchable. It just is, you know, that's how you describe it. You know, it's something you watch, but you can't watch it because there's nothing going in. Nothing is making sense. Everything is offending. Everything is just boring you, and everything is just so stupid and bizarre. that is Barbarella in a nutshell. Thanks for watching my review.